at 5 p.m. Before I start with the land acknowledgement, I just want to note a couple things. Councillor Munkoff-Swain will not be joining us tonight. Councillor Van Nieuwkerk is on his way and will be here shortly, and Councillor Barnhart is joining us virtually. Land acknowledgement. So the City of Beaumont respects the histories, languages, and cultures of all First Peoples of this land, whether they be of First Nation, Métis, or Inuit descent, and appreciates that their presence continues to enrich vibrant communities across the land. As we gather here in Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis Nation, we acknowledge that we are all treaty people and have ongoing responsibilities to protect and honor the treaty, the inherent rights of the people, and the land. Moving on to the next item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Do I have a member of council willing to make a motion to adopt the agenda as presented? Ready here, just 1 second. Should be good.
Thank you, Chair. I move that the February 18th, 2025 Committee of the Whole meeting agenda be adopted as presented. Perfect. Thank you, Councillor. Ms. Plashy, would you mind putting up the vote? And Councillor Barnhart, I will ask how you vote.
In favor.
Perfect. Thank you. That carries unanimously 6-0. Next item on the agenda is adoption of the minutes. Do I have a member of council willing to make a motion to adopt the minutes? Mayor Daniluk?
So move, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. And could we put that to vote, please? Councillor Barnhart, how do you vote?
In favor.
Perfect. That carries unanimously. Thank you. Next, Madam Clerk, do we have anyone registered for open forum?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We do not have any registrations for open forum this evening.
Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate that. Moving on to the next item would be presentations. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone registered for this evening? My understanding is I can answer my own question here as yes, we do. So with that being said, I will hop right into it and I will introduce the first presentation. So the first presentation is Friends of Medicare presentation. Mr. Galloway? Perfect. So thank you. Yeah, please come on forward. I will make sure to activate your mic here in just 1 second. I'll have you state your name for the record and you will be given 10 minutes to make your presentation. I am just going to figure out your mic here, and we should be good to go.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor, and to all of Council for having me today. I'm Chris Galloway. I'm the Executive Director at Friends of Medicare, and I'm not here tonight to present to a specific item that's coming up or anything like that, but it's really just to share who we are as Friends of Medicare and some of our shared priorities from what your Council has determined are priorities and how we might be able to support your work. So to get into it, see if the clicker works. We are a nonpartisan registered nonprofit society based here in Alberta. We've been around for over 45 years, working to protect and strengthen public health care for all. That's really why we exist. We believe that no matter who you are or what community you live in or how much money you have, you should have access to the health care you need. That Canadian promise of Medicare that we're hearing a lot about right now as things are happening south of us, right? So we are focused on education and advocacy. So I just want to, for clarity, say we are not a charity. We do not receive government money or foundation money or corporate sponsorships that some healthcare groups get from drug companies. That we are fully independent, so we are able to speak up for Albertans and for patients and for communities that we work with. We are not bound by any of those kind of funding or legal constraints. And part of our structure and why we're here in Beaumont today especially is we have a model where, Albertans who are concerned about healthcare in their community can form chapters within Friends of Medicare. So we're based out of Edmonton, our provincial office, but across the province we have chapters. And last year we had folks in Leduc, Beaumont start a new chapter. So we had a meeting with folks from Leduc, from Beaumont, from the county, who were concerned about access to healthcare and what was happening with healthcare, came together and we formed a new chapter. And a lot of them are here in the room or joining online today watching this presentation. And they live in all three of those communities and are really wanting to see access to healthcare improved. So that is part of our motto, and we support them in their work that they do. Just in terms of our provincial entity, we kind of have 4 priority areas we work on. As other issues come up, we respond and we acknowledge them if there's government consultations or those things. But the things we're always kind of driving is a push against privatization, a push to fix seniors care in Alberta and home care, because they're very problematic right now how services are being delivered and where, and also the push to expand what's covered with pharmacare, dental care, those kind of programs, and looking at mental health and addictions and how it's not been treated as healthcare historically and is kind of off on the side, and especially the impacts of the drug poisoning crisis that's ongoing. So we kind of task force and working groups and that who work on all these issues at all times, but as other issues come up or as local issues come up, we work on those as well. And the main way we do that is through public campaigns, education, advocacy, lobbying, asking Albertans to take action. So you have, I think, passed out to you like a stack of kind of papers that this is some of those campaigns that we've been running. If you want to check them out later, postcards, our newsletter and that you can look at and see some of the different campaigns we've done. I brought copies for you just for your information. But the other thing is we're running a pretty big province-wide campaign right now about the need to rebuild our public healthcare system, and that the main issue we're facing is one of capacity and specifically the workforce. So we have a growing province. We don't have the beds and the infrastructure we need to meet the needs. And you know that so well in Beaumont because places like here and Airdrie and Cochrane are the fastest growing communities. And they're also ones who don't have full hospital services and those kind of things. But beyond building the infrastructure is actually having the workers we need to do the work. So we're pushing really hard for a provincial strategy along with national partnerships to map out who we have and then look at how we retain folks in the system and recruit and train the workers we need in communities where we need them. That work hasn't happened. We don't have a provincial workforce plan. We haven't mapped out who we currently have, let alone what we need. So that is our big push heading into the provincial budget right now. And I just wanted to mention the healthcare restructuring before I talk to the specifics of Beaumont. The provincial government is obviously rolling out this massive restructuring, pulling the system into 4 different pieces: the primary care, acute care, continuing care, and mental health and addictions. And part of their justification when they initially announced this was that they were concerned with the provincial entity, the local communities didn't have enough of a voice in the structure, they were being overlooked. But as we're watching the rollout happen, that's not changing. Now we just have 4 entities that are disconnected from local communities. They didn't actually create local boards or advisory groups that have any sort of meaningful structure. So what we're hearing from municipalities across the province is they still feel like their needs aren't being met, but now there's this extra layer of chaos because they don't know where services are going to fall or who to meet with. There's now multiple ministers, multiple agencies, and so on. But I wanted to finish talking specifically about Beaumont because you've done such great work here with your needs assessment followed by the action plan. We've read that as Friends of Medicare in our chapter as part of the impetus for wanting to form a group is that, we have a lot of shared priorities with what the Beaumont Council has been talking about over the last while. The identifying the same issues around access to care, doctors coming up all the time, the lack of access to doctors and primary care, but also that there's no urgent care or emergency care or after-hour care in Beaumont. Everyone has to go to Edmonton. The lack of mental health supports. We've been working with folks living with disabilities around home care, and some of them live in Beaumont, and their ability to participate in the world and in the community is not being met because of the lack of services, the lack of accessibility legislation, and so on. And really just your framing of all of it as you surveyed residents and did the work, talking about those social determinants of health. That's how we see the world too, is that if we're not looking at those, then everything dominoes into the healthcare system. But a lot of what you've talked about are also our priorities that we would love to see action on and support action on as you move forward with your action plan. If there's ways we can work with the public, work with our membership to do that. And I wanted to mention the municipal role in all this, because it's great to see the leadership role Beaumont has taken as a growing community, doing that actual needs assessment, mapping it out, being thoughtful in what's needed. And we think that's really important, and we're seeing that more and more. And you know, what municipalities do impact our health, not just in terms of service delivery, but in how the city's built and all what kind of bylaws exist. All these things impact our ability to be healthy beyond service delivery. But what we're seeing across the province right now is kind of a lack of provincial leadership, and then municipalities are stepping up to fill the gap, especially in terms of doctors and primary care. And we get why that's happening. You know, we know why people are feeling that pressure, but we also don't think that municipal tax dollars should be funding primary care. There should be a provincial approach to that that supports municipalities in their recruitment initiatives, in their strategies, and so on. And so that's something we're pushing for, and we have met with a lot of municipal leaders. I've met with folks from Leduc and Devon, meeting with the Alberta municipalities in a couple weeks, provincial entity, and our chapter down in Calgary, Airdrie, Cochrane, that area where they're facing these same pressures. And what we're seeing is municipality after municipality coming up with their own strategy to try to fill that gap without a provincial strategy for physicians and primary care. And so we're just seeing a race to the bottom of how much money people are going to start throwing at the problem if we don't actually have a provincial approach. So, you know, we think there's a role for municipalities. We think that you're closest to the community. You're the best at doing that kind of recruitment, especially to get people to want to move here or open up practice here, but also that there's a role for us in pushing for provincial leadership, because, you know, if we don't have that in terms of the healthcare workforce, you know, we're just moving people around in a diminishing returns kind of game. So, you know, we're here tonight really just to introduce ourselves, to answer any questions if you have them, and say, we support your goals. If there's ways we can continue to support your goals, we would love to do that. And we're going to keep talking to folks in Leduc and Beaumont and the region about what they want for healthcare and trying to mobilize them to act on that, both either to your council or to the provincial government or the federal government, whenever the issue makes sense. So really, we just want to take a few minutes today to say hello, to introduce ourselves, to offer up that we're always willing to meet or talk and support your work and answer any questions if you have any. And I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Galloway, for that presentation. That being said, I will give the opportunity to fellow council members to ask questions if they have any. Councillor Barnhart, just because I can't see you, I will start with you and see if you have any questions.
Thank you, Chair Natellenbos. Not a question at this point. I'm really glad that the presentation was made, because I was not having the right information at the front of my head, and so now I have a better idea. Really, I'm here to listen as well, and hopefully learn some more about what we can do to support this very important initiative. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor. Next with a question is Councillor Penrod.
Thank you, Chair Natellenbos. Appreciate the presentation. I'm also appreciating the timely distribution of your literature. We're going to talk a little later in this meeting about our constant work to improve our communications with the public and some of the concepts that we're talking about, having a clear call to action, being able to absorb the message in 30 seconds or less. I see that in your material, so kudos for the good work your communications people are doing. Quick question, always the advocacy work of getting more and better healthcare in our community is a tough one. Every community is after it. You spoke to that in your presentation. So we're always looking for partners. Just wondering if you could talk more about your nonpartisan nature of Friends of Medicare. I know maybe partly because of the unique political environment of Alberta, Friends of Medicare have had some pretty public historic fights with the provincial government, which has usually been conservative in Alberta. And so obviously we want to make sure we have strategic partnerships. Our partnerships have to help us work with whoever's occupying the legislature. So maybe you could speak a bit more about that. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is, the history of Alberta, as you'll all know, is the Conservatives are often in power. But our stances are consistent. no matter who's in power, and we'll compliment them or praise them if they do a good thing, and we will criticize them if they do not. You know, an example of a campaign we've been running for decades is on universal pharmacare at the national level, saying we need drug coverage, that we need that, no matter who's been in power. When there's been the ball moving forward on it, we've said good things. When they've started rolling back, we've criticized them. And whenever we do that, we get accused of being partisan by whichever side. You know, the Liberals are mad if we're criticizing them, and then they're, you know, really happy when we say their bill's a good thing, and so on, right? And the same happens at the provincial level. So, you know, our stances, and you can go, if you look at our website, on those key issues, never change. We think it should be universal, free access to the healthcare people need when they need it in their community where it can be. So, you know, that's how we approach our work. Obviously, right now, we have a provincial government that's doing a lot in healthcare all at once. So we've been in the media a lot, often criticizing them for some of those decisions, but it's based on our set policies that are always consistent. So, you know, when they have done the good thing in the last couple of years, like continuous glucose monitors for folks living with diabetes, of course, that's good news. We're happy they did that, and we'll say that. But we are very concerned about some of the other things they're doing right now, of course, too. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McCook.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate you guys also touching on social determinants of health. I know that's something that's kind of always at the forefront for myself when I make decisions, something that I spoke about when we talked about access to transit, but I think it's something that's often forgotten about through the policymaking process. Also appreciate your advocacy work. It's not always easy work. It's often thankless, but I just wanted to acknowledge the work you're doing. A few questions. So how do you see the current trends towards privatization impacting access to care, particularly for vulnerable populations, and what steps can municipalities take to advocate for accessible public health care on that front?
Yeah, that's a good question. We know with further privatization, it does impact access. We're already seeing a growth in fees that crop up, some of which we would argue are illegal under the Canada Health Act. But we're seeing that. Membership-only clinics, fees for same-day access. If you have the money, you can get your surgery tomorrow. You just have to skip over a province. There's all sorts of ways that the inequity is growing. We actually have a fact sheet, a little report coming out right away, looking at the impacts of privatization on the inequity of it, because that is very true. But we want to document it in a way that's, you know, academic in a way. Profit, and you know, if you're not someone with money, there's ways they can make more money off of someone who has it. You know, privilege starts to play a role. Even just navigating the system as they're pulling it into these pieces. You know, the more privilege you have, the easier it is to navigate systems, right? And if you don't have that, you'll just avoid things or miss things. And, you know, the longer things go on, the health impacts can be worse, right? And we see that throughout. So it's both the destructuring, almost I would call it, the pulling it apart, but then the adding the private partners as well. You know, we even have seen that with things like flu shot access, where now you have to call around to a bunch of pharmacies to try to find out where to get one, because there isn't necessarily public health clinics anymore. But some people have the time and ability to do that, and some don't. So then it impacts who accesses services.
Perfect, thank you. And then with the significant restructuring that we're seeing, there's obviously potential risks, and the government sees opportunities. How can local governments support a smooth transition while also advocating for communities' needs?
Yeah, I think being clear on what you need and want, which you have been with, you know, if urgent care is a goal, being clear about that up front and pushing that so that there's not the wiggle room to say they didn't know, they're doing this different plan, you know, because they haven't. And we're seeing a lot of that kind of happen in Airdrie right now. I don't know if you're following it, but, you know, they have their urgent care health center project underway, but now there's a proposal for a second private project that the government's looking at funding that isn't necessarily based on the community needs or wants. It's based on, you know, setting up this contract. So I think being super clear will be helpful, especially as these different entities, you know, if primary care is a key priority, getting in there now and saying, here's what we think we need, here's what we're willing to do as a municipality, how can we make it happen? Because I think a lot of folks, unless they're vocal, are going to get lost as the restructuring keeps unfolding and people are moved around and, you know, bureaucrats change and who's doing what changes, and Alberta Health suddenly is doing parts of it and then they change leadership. There's a lot of, you know, uncertainty right now. So I think the clarity and consistency will help.
Perfect, thank you. One more question, Chair?
Just one. No, just kidding. Go ahead.
Thank you. So lastly, I guess, how can municipal leaders work more effectively with folks like you, Friends of Medicare, and other stakeholders who are more intimately or similarly intimately connected with the community, but more specifically on healthcare, and how can we engage them more to advocate for policies that prioritize a strong publicly funded healthcare system?
Absolutely. First, I say we're always happy to, meet or be consulted, or if you're doing more, process type consultations. We do have folks in our chapter in Leduc Beaumont that work in healthcare, that are retired from healthcare, who've been patients, who are living with disabilities. So they have a lot of personal experience with those systems living out here, right? So I think we're always willing to share that experience and expertise, but also just knowing what's coming up. A lot of what we've done in Edmonton is, if counselors let us know this issue is going to be on debate in a couple months, it's, a big, healthcare, there was some work on heat waves and other issues. When we know about that, we have a list of folks. We can say, hey, this is coming up. You can write in. You should watch it. You should see what's happening, and really helping keep people informed that way who care about these issues, and then start telling other folks in the community about it, right? Including building support. I think a lot of people don't know about the Beaumont health reports that have happened. I love to tell people about it because I think it's a great thing. And I'm in the community, people are like, oh, where can I find it? And I send the link to your website all the time to folks to go look at it. So just finding ways to get that out there more, and we're happy to help with that kind of work as well.
Perfect, thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor. Mayor Daniluk.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Mr. Galloway, for coming. Thank you for recognizing the work this council has done in a leadership role with the health assessments we did. It was a huge project. We're the first municipality in Alberta to do that kind of assessment. AHS is very much aware of that, and it's working in our favor to advocate for a healthcare facility of some kind here in Beaumont. So thank you for recognizing that. And I do appreciate the work your group is doing in terms of community involvement. So please keep us informed of what you find out there and what you hear out there, because we hear things in Beaumont, but you're hearing the people in Leduc County, other places like Devon. Keep letting us know how things are, what's being said out there. Any way you can advocate for Beaumont is good for our region as well too, because if we have some kind of health facility here, it'll draw people from Leduc, from Devon, take the pressure off of Grey Nuns Hospital, and also Leduc Hospital as well too. So it's a benefit for our region, not just Beaumont. And we're looking at a very regional approach with AHS saying it's not just Beaumont. A facility here will take pressure off other areas, and that's something that's got their attention. So we appreciate you. Anything you can share with us, information you may be gathering. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Van Nieuwkerk.
Hello, thank you. Earlier on in the presentation, you spoke of individual community efforts that you've seen that are underway to recruit physicians and bring good people to the community. Just wondering, can you give us an idea, and as you know, this is live streamed, recorded, this is on purpose here. Can you give us an idea of some of the tactics that you're seeing for other municipalities using? Like what are municipalities trying to do? What lengths are they going to try and attract the latest, greatest, brightest minds into the communities to take care of the people?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And part of our advocacy and being consistent is I say things publicly all the time, and they're the same things. So it's okay that we're being recorded. But there's different approaches and different ways of either spending money or trying to create the conditions. You look at somewhere like Hinton that faced a rather extreme situation where they had lost half their doctors, and the clinic was at risk of closing because they didn't have enough physicians to keep it operational. And they've put, I think, $500,000 into that clinic to keep it open for the next 2 years while they try to recruit. That's a lot of money to throw into something just to keep it open, not even fully operational, while they try to solve their recruitment, and they're doing recruitment work. There's places like Grand Prairie who have hired staff at the municipality, I think, or jointly somehow, and they bring people in, they tour them around, they host them, they tell them about the community, they talk about the cost of living advantages and those kind of sales pitches to get especially doctors to come move there. I know of other municipalities who've looked at housing Bow Valley and elsewhere of like, is there a way we can provide a housing incentive or something, because the cost of living is a barrier for getting new people to move there. Loan forgiveness is something folks have looked at for student loans. So there's all sorts of different things happening, kind of scattershot across the province and across the prairies. I'm from Saskatchewan originally, and my whole life this has been a conversation in Estevan, where I'm from, and went so far as they actually built a clinic attached to the hospital that the doctors could work out of, that was owned by the hospital, so they would have people to do the ER shifts, because they could just go down the hallway and figure out solutions that way. And the community and the municipality paid for that to make that happen. So there's all sorts of different things happening. Some cost more than others. Some of them are just top-ups, like we'll pay you money if you move here, basically. And so we're kind of looking at, we haven't done this work because there's a lot to try to piece together because no one tracks it, but we kind of want to look and see what are all these municipalities doing across the province, how are they spending the money, and what's the impact, and kind of look at that more closely. Because right now I think people are just trying whatever they can to get people to move around. And I think you're in a good position to recruit folks. You're near a major city, you're near the airport, you have a nice community that's affordable. So in terms of doctors especially, I think that recruitment work, if it's done in a coordinated way, could work. But yeah, how do we make sure it's not just throwing money at the wall and then people come for 2 years and then move anyway, and you're doing that every 2 years for the rest of history with diminishing returns. So yeah, I don't know if that helps answer your question, but I'd say there's just a lot of different things happening at once. I've even seen like car allowances, or here's a car, if you'll move here. So
yeah, no, I think what you just shared validates a lot of the individual conversation that that we have had and heard of as we go to different networking events and those types of things. And loan forgiveness is a thing. I also heard an idea floated out there around partnering with current students and supposing their outcome of becoming a doctor and some kind of an agreement that they come back home to practice, right? Like I don't have an example of where that is in play right now. It was just kind of chatted about, kind of on a water cooler conversation type thing. But it just shows how creative communities are having to be to try and recruit, and we're all pulling from the same pool of talent, right? And there is a brain drain happening right now. So my last question will be, what kind of so I've seen the advocacy priorities like in the presentation, when you spoke of privatization, seniors care, pharmacare, mental health and addictions as priority areas. One of the things that's happening right now is there isn't room for local students to take up positions, to train, to become medically trained in our province, to take residents back up in the communities that they grew up in. We have families leaving for the Caribbean. We have families leaving for other provinces. We have families leaving to the States, sending their students away to be trained. And I'm not sure how many of those local Albertans are going to be back. Can you speak to any advocacy efforts on that, or is that something that needs some more love?
It definitely needs more love, and you're right, once people move, it's harder to get them back, right? So if we saw that in the 90s too in Alberta. A ton of nurses moved to the States and they've never come back, right? And so you lose a whole generation at that point. So there's a few things in your question, ensuring that there's the residencies and the training opportunities where people can come experience the community, I think is important to it. I often hear from new graduates that they can't find a full-time job, so actually ensuring we, are lobbying to have positions for people, that we're not waiting till the doctor retires to fund another doctor in the community or whatever it might be, that we actually do some transition that way so that young people stay. And can stay for a long time. Because if you get someone who will stay for 20 years, that's a lot better than someone who's just coming through on locums or whatever it might be. But in everything that's happening in the province right now, we think there needs to be a better coordination between training and our needs. We're seeing a lot of announcements in healthcare that aren't connected to a plan for post-secondary or training or those kind of things. An example that comes to mind is the nurse practitioner announcement that nurse practitioners can have their clinics now and bill in that way, and there's a model for that, which will hopefully be good to help with primary care. But there wasn't an associated increase in funding to train more nurse practitioners to the universities. And so we're just pulling nurse practitioners out of hospitals to open clinics, but we didn't actually open up space, and we could absolutely double our capacity quickly to train more nurse practitioners if that's part of the plan. But we'd actually have to have a plan then. And so that's kind of our first point is we're not doing workforce planning. So it's really hard to know what we need or what kind of student opportunities or residencies or what locums or whatever we might need are when we haven't even mapped out what we have and what we need, let alone attach that to spaces in our institutions. So there's kind of a big gap there. And like, how do we look at, young people and new people and get them into the system when we're not really looking at it that way at all?
Yeah, so much work to do. I'm glad that you're taking a chunk on here.
Yeah,
So thank you.
it's a small issue.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor. Majority of my questions were either asked or answered, but I guess I do have one. Just for a little bit of clarity, obviously, the presentation provided a lot of information in what obviously you support and the group supports. Just curious as to what type of support you guys provide to municipalities, or maybe some concrete examples of some of the successes you and the team have had since 1979.
Yeah, well, I wasn't around then, so I can't tell you about 1979. It depends on what folks want. We're always happy to publicly support calls. If there's calls from the municipality, with Hinton, we met with them about, what role they wanted us to play, if we were being vocal, if that would help, or if not, right? We're open to those conversations. So sometimes it's directly writing in letters or advocacy in support of desired policies or actions that we want to see. We're working closely in Airdrie with different folks who think they really need a hospital. That's what they actually think they need, and we're going to be talking about that heading into the provincial budget very publicly. We do public events. We have extensive lists of folks who've signed up for our information that we share actions with, so it depends on the situation and what's being asked for. Even with there's the ongoing engagements from the province right now on the restructuring, sharing that with folks to say, go to these, speak up, speak in your community, getting folks to go. So we've had folks going all over the province to those to both hear what's being said and say what they're worried about in Stettler or whatever community it might be, right? So I think it just depends on what's wanted and what's helpful. But yeah, our work is advocacy, it's education, it's public events, it's writing into the local paper, whatever it might be, to try to just get attention on issues.
Perfect. Thank you for that. I don't see any additional questions, so I thank you for your time and I thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for giving us a few minutes today.
With that being said, next item on the agenda is 5.2, proposed changes to planning and development notifications. I believe Ms. Foley will be speaking on that matter.
Over here. Thank you. Oh, can you hear me? All right. Chair Natellenboss and members of the committee, thanks for the opportunity to come present tonight. I'll be talking about proposed changes thank you very much. Proposed changes to the planning and development notification system. So you will note that Council actually had first reading on changes to the public notification bylaw. So this is something complementary to that, but a different thing, just so that that's clear. But I will be talking about how these two things interrelate. Let's see if we can get our next slide. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to give you a bit of a background on notification needs, limited jurisdictional review, talk about the changes we'd like to propose, give some examples of what that could look like. Financial and project risks will be reviewed with you, and then talk about community insights, and then we'll have an opportunity to talk about it all. Okay, so for background, planning and development has noticed a number of areas that could be enhanced around how residents are informed about development. So really we want to ensure that residents are aware of both proposed and approved changes as it relates to land use and development matters, and they know where to access updated information and also how to engage in the process if and where that's appropriate. So the project goals are really about empowering residents to engage meaningfully in the development process. Engagement from the public in the development process is a real key pillar to how planning and development works in the best possible ways. So we want to make sure that residents get all of those opportunities and that they're right-sized for them. So there were really 6 areas of improvement that we're looking at. The first is subdivision notifications. I think members of council are aware that there's been a few contentious subdivision applications recently where residents have received notices. Those notices can be really confusing for residents. They're getting a letter and it's identifying that there's feedback wanted. They'll give the feedback and then they feel like they're engaged in that process. They're expecting something similar to a redistricting or a plan amendment where there'll be a public hearing, there'll be an opportunity maybe for appeal like a development permit, but that really doesn't exist in the subdivision process. So it's confusing for residents and they get mixed messages around how they can engage, and there's a lot of frustration related to that. So that was an area identified as priority for changes, and I'll talk about what those might look like. There are limitations around notification boundaries that are in the land use bylaw now. So depending on what kind of application it is, notification might be restricted to an adjacent property. So something that's, next to or across the street from maybe a house that has an application coming. But if you live 2 doors down, you might also feel impacted by that, but you won't get the letter. And so those people can feel disenfranchised in the process, that they weren't asked when they felt like they should have been. So that's something that we want to address moving forward with different proposals. We also talked about differences in notification based on tenancy. Right now, particularly with using letters, the people who get it are homeowners. Somebody who's renting won't get the letter unless their landlord gives it to them or tells them about it. And so it makes it harder for them to engage in those processes, even though they're also part of our community. A lot of these notifications that are going out use very formal language. I'm a planner myself, so I'm certainly guilty of this, but planners tend to use technical language, and for good reason. There's a lot of detail that we have to cover in these items. But again, that can make it really difficult for the average layperson who's probably not a planner to actually understand what's going on, what we're asking them, and how they can be involved in a way that's meaningful. And finally, there's administrative burden. Our staff spend a lot of time administering mailouts, so making letters, stuffing envelopes, making sure that those things get out to the public. There are higher and better uses for that staff, so we want to make sure that we're using them for the best purposes that we can. So to start off the project, we did a limited jurisdictional review to look at, what the neighbors are up to. What we found is that there are many municipalities that are doing this same work and have been over the past 5 years or so. In general, most of them are moving towards a higher reliance on the use of signage or website materials over traditional mailouts. The materials that they're using tend to be more visual, widespread reduction of technical language in favor of more plain language. And materials are prepared to encourage greater equity, even looking at things like the colors that you use to ensure that they're potentially more accessible to somebody who's colorblind, as an example. So we're talking about a few proposed changes. The first one is that we're updating the templates that are being used. We'd like to update the templates that are being used for notifications so that they're more eye-catching, they use plain language, and allow for adaptable use. So right now, if an application, say, requires a mail-out letter and it needs a sign and we're going to post it on our website, that tends to be done 3 different times. We're using we want to use templates moving forward that you can make once and you can use them for a variety of purposes. We want to reduce the use of mailouts in favor of signage and website materials, not just because it's necessarily easier, but because we think that they have better efficacy, and introduce new signage for approved high-profile projects. So these would be approved projects that are through the process and using signage for greater awareness so that residents know, hey, that vacant lot has something going on with it that's already been approved, and I should expect construction in the next, 4 to 6 months or whatever that might look like. So my apologies for the very tiny writing here, and I'll give you the overview of what's being proposed here. So we're contemplating changes in a number of areas. The first one identified is for development permits. Right now, development permits, just going to open this up here because it's small for me too. Bear with me. Thanks. I've got it here too. I'll talk you through it. So for development permits, right now, for pre-decision, there's really no notification. So when an application comes in, residents don't tend to hear about it. Our land use bylaw does allow for provisions for the use of a sign if the development officer thinks that there might be information that residents would know about that would affect their decision. And so these signs are rarely used in current practice. So what we're proposing to change is that there would be much wider use of signage so that when there's a variance application, so that's talking about making changes to an existing regulation, or it's a discretionary use, that residents know about it before the decision is made. And then after the decision is made, what we're proposing is to remove those letters I talked about that are only going to a limited number of people, and again, replacing that with a new sign that would say that this has been approved, there's an appeal process that you can engage in, and this is where it is. If you think about something like this happening on a street, right now, let's say we have 4 different applications on the same street, all for different discretionary uses. Everybody on that street might not actually get all 4 of those notices. If they do, they probably won't be able to visualize where on the street these things are, and it would be hard for them to understand that. If we change to the use of signage in place of that, anybody walking down that street would be able to see that there's 4 applications going on, where they are, which house it applies to, and it's much easier for them to understand cumulative impacts and where it is and how that might affect them in a more direct way. It also allows people to self-select really whether they're impacted or not. Right now, that's a decision that's being made by the person who decides who's getting the letter, where if we're using signage, the actual person who sees the sign can make that decision for themselves. Yes, I feel affected, I want to be involved in this process, and here's the information on how I can actually do that. And then we're also talking about adding signage, like I'd mentioned, for approved projects that are high profile, just again to raise that community awareness. The next one is subdivision, and we talked already a little bit about how we currently use letters. Again, those letters now don't actually go out for all subdivisions. There's only a subset of subdivisions that the Municipal Government Act requires us to notify about, and those are within areas that don't have an approved area structure plan. In Beaumont, we have a number of areas like Dance Row and Rousseau that are under outline plans. So under the MGA, we have to provide some level of notice. And that's because in most municipalities, for outline plans, they don't actually have to do a public hearing. Here in Beaumont, we do a public hearing, so people do have an opportunity to engage in that way that the MGA doesn't contemplate, but we don't have a provision in place in order to sort of go around that, which is why we're sending out those subdivision letters. So to address that, the MGA would allow for us to post it on the website and give people the opportunity to engage in that way without specifically sending a letter to them and asking them. And that's what we're proposing. And the intention is not to remove their ability to access that opportunity, but instead to encourage them to engage at the plan amendment and the redistricting stage, where all of those processes are in place for them to have their say about the things that they're concerned about. As I think many of you will know from what we've heard as it relates to subdivisions in the past little while, the concerns that people are raising for the most part as it relates to those subdivisions are really things that are being dealt with at the plan level or redistricting. They maybe don't want more density. They're concerned about neighborhood look and feel. Those things are all things that were already decided in the plan amendment and the redistricting phase, but they maybe didn't get engaged at that point. So pushing people back into that place where their voice has the most say is really the intention around making this change. So we're still providing them that opportunity through notification on the website, but we're not setting up sort of a false expectation about standing that they don't have at the subdivision phase. So the next area we're talking about making changes is for that redistricting and plan amendment. And in this case, we're actually talking about enhancement. As I identified already, the plan amendment and redistricting phase is an area where we have lots of opportunity for the public to get involved. They can provide their feedback while an application is being processed. There's a public hearing process. They can get involved with their counselor. And so there's lots of opportunities for them to engage. And so we really want to augment that. So we would still have our traditional mail out as it relates to redistrictings and plan amendments, but we would be adding signs for redistricting specifically. We propose not to do it for plan amendments because plan amendments are often in areas that people don't live yet, so they won't see the sign in most cases. And in areas that are built up already, where a plan amendment would be required, it would also require a redistricting, so that sign would go up either way. And then also adding a website for both the pre-decision and the post-decision. So for residents who have engaged, there's an easy way for them to go to the website and find out what happened, rather than having to know which council meeting it was dealt with and start sifting through agendas to see what happened. Subdivision and Development Appeal Board is very heavily regulated, and the policies that we have in place right now work, so we're not touching anything as it relates to that. And public hearings, the only real change that we're making there is to shorten how much technical information is in that newspaper ad. So people are getting the, hey, something's going on, there's a public hearing. If you want to know more about how to register or what you can do, go to our website and you can find that additional information. So to keep that clear and that call to action very straightforward for people, not getting lost in all of that technical detail. And that's really one area where there's a nice cross-pollination with that public hearing bylaw amendment that would also facilitate that change happening. So now we're going to look at some examples of what this could look like. So on the left is our existing development permit notice as an example, and on the right is what we're proposing. So if you look at the one on the left, blink at it a couple of times, you probably, if you're a lay person, you have no idea what this is for or why you're getting it. You're thinking like, did I apply for a development permit? What is this? You're going to read this very technical information and think, I don't even know what this is or what they're asking me for. So you move over to the right, we've got approved development change. You know exactly what this is. You're telling me about something. Again, plain language, we're talking about something is changing in this neighborhood, we're telling you about it. There's an appeal, you can participate in that appeal if you want to, and this is how you can do that. When we're talking about redistrictings, this is what that could look like. Again, very similar in nature. We're using a different color here so that you can see it's something different than that green one. So somebody's made an application in this area that wants to change something. We want you to know about it. Here's how you can engage in that process. Again, clear, straightforward, still including all of the technical requirements that we need to meet all of our obligations under the Municipal Government Act and those sorts of things, but in a way that's more visual, eye-catching, and easier for residents to understand. So in terms of risks and community insights, overall financial changes are pretty nominal. We do expect some reduction in the administrative time to prepare and administer mailouts. So we're talking about people physically stuffing envelopes. And we're expecting that that is going to be balanced out by an increase in administrative time in addressing community interests. On the whole, I would much rather have those professionals engaging with the community than stuffing envelopes. So I think that's a good thing overall. For community insights, this project is really a direct response to community needs, and we feel it will enhance people's opportunity to engage meaningfully in the process. And we also are working with a supportive communication strategy to support implementation moving forward. So in order to implement these changes, we'd need to come forward to council with a land use bylaw amendment that would allow the change from letters to signage for development permits and also for subdivisions. So that would be something coming forward to council at a future date. But at this time, I would just invite any feedback, thoughts, questions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Foley, for that presentation. Obviously, a lot of information. Councillors have any lights on? First up is Councillor McCook.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate this, and I think the change with some of the visuals will be a lot easier for people to read, and it'll probably be a little bit more attention grabbing as well. They'll recognize that they should maybe read it. Happy to hear that there'll also be changes based on tenancy. Will that also include commercial buildings?
Yes, it will.
Okay, perfect. And then will some of the technical language that we're talking about also include the identification of where it is? Because right now we use lot, block, whatnot, and people are like, I don't know, and move on. So will we at least include a street in addition to lot, block, and whatnot?
Yes, that information will also be included, and because in most cases we're all talking about a sign, it'll actually be in front of what they're looking at, so they'll be able to look and know exactly which property it relates to.
Okay, perfect. And then for one of the changes, it said add additional signage for permitted uses for high-profile and/or large projects. What will determine a high-profile project?
I think a good example of that would be something like a spree, where you have a big site. This is in the center of town that was approved, but people don't necessarily know that it was approved. It was a permitted use, so it just gives that awareness. But that would be a decision that would be made by that development officer, the manager, or potentially also the director, depending on how much interest they're expecting, how large the change is, that sort of thing.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then I know we're going to be moving to a little bit more signage. Is that going to ensure that residents who don't have who don't rely on the internet as much, they're able to see what's going on? Is that the signage method rather than the mail out?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it addresses a couple of things. It allows people to see cumulative effects. So if you have multiple applications on the same street, you can actually physically see that that's the case, where you can't if you have a letter. It allows, the renter walking their dog to also see the sign, where they wouldn't have access to that. And yeah, for those who maybe don't read the paper, or they didn't pick up their mail last week or whatever, again, they still have that opportunity to see and engage if they choose to.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I look forward to seeing some of these changes. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor McCook. Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, thank you. Bigger picture, one of the things I want to point out is, what we're seeing in front of us here is a document that showcases continuous improvement in the city's administrative process based upon community feedback. Time and time again, I hear from folks that they don't feel heard, or their feedback isn't being heard, or no one cares what I say, no one cares what I think. And I just want to point out that a bunch of these issues that are highlighted in this report have caused a lot of anxiety in the community. I didn't know this was going to be here. I didn't know that was going to be there. No one told me. No one asked me. And those are all fair concerns, and I won't diminish or downplay any of them. But what I will say is a lot of that feedback is gathered up in this document, and there are attempts being made to address that. So I just want to put that out there first, because I think it's important to acknowledge the work that's being done here. So that's great. New topic, notification letters. So on the notification letter front, we're going to add some, we're going to remove some, we're going to make some changes, we're not going to make some changes. What I would say is that the notification letters that have been sent out for the properties that may be more higher profile or contentious have all had a way of making their way to the local social media pages. So I think it's just safe to accept that that's where they may go, and that's fine. There's not a problem with that. But what I see is an opportunity. So in those letters, I think there might be an opportunity to add some more context, add some more why, add some more here's what we're doing. Because right now, I think the verbiage in the letter just says, we're distributing this letter because the process says we're supposed to, right? And so I think if we understand how the community may use these informational pieces, then let's take it for what it is and add some more, use the opportunity to add a little bit more why to it. So I think that might be an approach that could be considered. I also want to highlight attachment 1, the little text. It's little text because there's a lot there. There are no less than, 5 processes or 5 application types, I think is what the categories were. And each of those has a process associated with it. What I would love to do is say, can't we just map out the process and, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you are here right now, this is where the feedback for this goes? Sure, and that'd be great. The problem is there's 5 of those to make, and then you get confused with which one you are. Am I on a development permit or a subdivision appeal, or a public hearing, or a redistricting, or statutory or non-statutory, a public hearing? It just gets really hard to navigate. So I'm just acknowledging the intricacies of each process. So as much as the processes align, ideas like that can be simplified, but when the processes aren't as similar or require additional steps, it could be just another confusing piece for the public, right? So, and I think the last piece for me comes around the, sorry, I didn't write this note down here, just the idea that go where the people go, and that's the fence beside the property, right? And the idea that we're going to take a more visual approach and, maybe put up some signage and, zip tie it on the fence, like whatever those types of things are taken, and people can see it on the way by, use plain language, QR codes, all of those tools, I think, are just going to be more helpful. So I wholly expect that if we fast forward months from now when we're doing all this, we're going to get some more feedback, and that's fine. But I just ask people to, be patient as we work with that feedback for the next round of, considerations, because, continuous improvement is a continuous thing. So thank you. That's all I have to say, Chair.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor. I'll move to Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you very much, Chair. First off, in the right direction. Definitely can get very complicated very quickly, and years of experience, I still can't figure it out some days because it's going in so many different directions. So I really do appreciate it, and the process smoother and reach as many people as need to be reached. 2 points. One is a question to the administration. I think you mentioned that this ties in with the public hearing, the first reading, rather, of the bylaw on public notification. Could you remind me again how these 2 things fit together?
Thank you very much for the question. So the public notification bylaw changes would allow us to simplify that information that's going to go in the newspaper, which would correspond to what we're proposing here for newspaper ads for things like a public hearing. So basically that bylaw will provide the tools to help support this work.
Thank you. Okay. And the second question, and this may sound very strange because none of us want more emails coming directly to our email boxes. However, I know from talking to people that have not known of things happening, they wonder why they can't just get it directly to them. Well, of course, we can't, we're saying it costs a lot to mail it out. People don't necessarily read it. It's a lot of administrative time. Email is easier, but again, there are restrictions for privacy and things like that. I just wonder if there's a way, and if we've already thought about it and thrown it out as not a good idea, that's fine. Please let me know, where a citizen could request to be notified about certain types of information by email, so that there would be some way that we could not only rely on the citizen to go and look it up, even if it's on the city's website or in social media, but that there would be something coming to their inbox that says, there's something significant we want you to pay attention to. But they've opted in for that. Again, I might have missed this somewhere along the line, but if there's any comments on that?
Again, as related to that public notification bylaw, it's my understanding that our communications team, along with corporate analytics, are actually going to be exploring that further in the future. So it is something that's on administration's radar, but we don't have a solution tomorrow as it relates to that.
Okay, good. Still on the radar. That's all I wanted to know. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Mayor Daniluk.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Appreciate that. Great presentation, good information. Read those ones. Thank you very much for asking those. I want to go back just to Steve's comment initially because I agree wholeheartedly. This whole process is based on feedback from the public. Past good experiences and past bad experiences with notifications especially, and people being heard, we do listen. And this is a result of those many engagements some residents have had with the individual councillors, with myself at coffee sessions, or to City Hall at presentation in open forum. So we do listen, and I think especially slides 8 and 9 showing the improvements on the changes, notifications, massive improvement. It's very easy to read, it makes sense, it's very clear, it's concise, and it's easy to read, which is critically important. These are important, complicated issues, so I'm very impressed with what we've done so far. As Steve mentioned, the proof being the pudding next time we have a situation that has a controversy to it. But this, to me, is a good indication of administration stepping up their game in terms of delivering to our residents and listening to our residents as well, too. So hats off. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Penrod.
Thank you, Chair Natellenbos. Appreciate the presentation tonight, Ms. Foley, and also noting some of the complexity of this file you just stated. It's happening, kind of stretching across at least 3 departments that are involved in this work, so appreciate the cooperation internally to make this improvement happen. Just wanted to pick up, you've asked for in this, in your report, some general input, so a couple questions and also just some observations. I think Mayor Daniluk and Councillor Van Newkirk have done a good job of sketching out that this report is in part, and proposal is in part response to community feedback, but it also takes into account a survey of best practices, and those best practices are emerging and evolving as our ability to engage different medias evolves also. In the fall, on behalf of the city, I was able to attend a conference called Stronger Together, a regional library conference. And there, a keynote presentation was made by Dave Meslin, who's an author and has written a book called Rebuilding Democracy from the Ground Up. He makes the humorous point there that if Nike advertised like municipalities do, they'd never sell another shoe. And he goes on to kind of dare municipalities and governments in general to communicate more effectively. And so his 4 points for superb, enticing public notices are 1, they should be gorgeous. 2, they should highlight the most important information that can be consumed in 3 to 5 seconds, kind of in between the mailbox and the recycling bin. 3, they should clearly highlight the opportunities for engagement, the what's, the how's, and the when's, and they should always include a call to action. Your voice matters. We want your opinion. This is your chance to be heard. And I'm encouraged to see some of the proposed templates you've outlined actually pick up on all 4 of these best practices. So thank you for the work that's being done in that direction. I am a little bit, so I think we're headed in the right direction with this. I'm a little bit concerned with the proposal to eliminate one method. I think there's been reasonable rationale given for why we would eliminate some of the letters if they're not being as effective as other practices like signs might be. It just seems to me like in a rapidly changing environment where public trust we're hearing and seeing is low, it seems to me that more communication across various types of media is better than fewer. And so in that case, I think it's just an observation. It's an open debate, I think. It sort of comes into my questions, which are, how will we know if these changes have the desired outcomes? So if we're changing multiple variables at once, are we going to be clear on what variable change actually drove the changes that we're observing on the other end? We understand this is a process of continual refinement, but we can only refine a process every so often, right? So that's my big question is, how do we know if these changes have the desired outcomes? And then what are we measuring? What do we plan to measure? for how long and how? Thank you.
Thank you. Those are great questions, and I'm glad to hear that I'm aligned with Steve Meslin. In terms of the and instead of in place of, as you were identifying, I think administration took the intention of trying to use the best medium to communicate that information. It's always better to do everything, but given limited resources and availability, we wanted to prioritize, which is why we chose one over the other. And also as it relates to that, in most cases, but not in all cases. As you'll note, we did keep letters in the plan amendment redistricting and also as a part of the SDAB process for that reason. But also as it related to the jurisdictional scan, most municipalities had moved away from mailouts in place of signage and had found that to be effective. So we're also using that that information taken from other places, but your point is well made. I'll also note as it relates to measurement, our expectation is that we will actually see more engagement, and that's something that we can measure fairly closely because we're going to get more calls, more hits, more questions. And I think that having a more intentional monitoring program as it relates to that once we roll it out is a great suggestion and something that that I'll definitely note. So thank you for that.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor. I guess just a couple comments. I do echo Councillor Penrod's comment just in terms of potentially reducing one of the methods that we communicate. Again, I think it was outlined well as to why we're reducing the letters or eliminating them as a whole. So there's definitely understanding there. So I appreciate that and the clarity that came with that. I also appreciate Councillor Penrod's unique analogies, whether it's from someone else or not. But if we were to look at Exhibit A, the first letter, I would not buy those shoes. Exhibit B, I would buy those shoes. So it is a step in the right direction, no pun intended, but it's good. It's good to see that we're providing potentially, I won't say less information, but sometimes less is more. Just providing the information that should be provided so that people have a better understanding of what's going on. So appreciate that. Next on the list is item 5.3, Municipal Policing Committee. Ms. Darje, I will put you on, I believe, mic number 9. I think we are good.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Joanne Dargy. I'm the Director of Legal and Legislative Services, and with me this evening is Director of Protective Services, Jay Melvin, to answer questions, and who also did some significant work on this bylaw that is being presented to you. In December of 2022, the Police Amendment Act received a royal assent. However, it was not immediately proclaimed in force. Recently, certain sections of that act were proclaimed in force, giving effect to 2 regulations that provide for police governance bodies to be established before March 1st, 2025. Every community in Alberta served by the RCMP is required to be represented by either a municipal policing committee, a regional policing committee, or the provincial police advisory board, depending on the municipality's population size and type of police service agreement. According to the province, the creation of these new governance bodies responds to a long-standing desire of communities to have more say in how they are policed by the RCMP. These bodies are intended to give communities the opportunity to provide input on local and provincial policing priorities and RCMP service delivery. Communities like Beaumont, with a population of 15,000 or greater, and who have entered into an agreement with the Government of Canada for RCMP policing services, are required to establish by bylaw a municipal policing committee by March 1st, 2025. Prior to these recent amendments, a policing committee was optional. Beaumont currently has an RCMP Community Advisory Committee. Councillor Natellenbos is primary and Councillor McCook is alternate, are council's representatives on that committee. The Community Advisory Committee is not established by bylaw, and additionally, the current composition and terms of that committee may not fully align with the new regulations. To highlight some of what the new regulations are for this municipal policing committee, we'll start with the membership requirements. MPCs will consist of between 3 and 7 members appointed by council. All members appointed to an MPC must pass an enhanced security check, which I'll get into more detail in a minute. The appointment of a member to a municipal policing committee may not be revoked by council except for cause. The term of a member of council appointed to the MPC will terminate when that person ceases to be a member of council. A member of council appointed to an MPC is eligible to be elected as chair or vice chair of the committee. However, the chief elected official or the mayor is not eligible to be elected as chair or vice chair. Municipalities may also choose whether to establish remuneration for their policing committee through their MPC bylaw. The minister has advised that he may also appoint a small number of members to a municipal policing committee. However, we're seeking clarification on this as the regulations actually refer to a police commission and not a policing committee. So we want to make sure that distinction is correct. Municipalities are responsible for the cost of establishing, administering, and sustaining membership of its MPC. Enhanced security checks, as I mentioned, are now required for members of policing committees. According to the province, all appointees should be properly vetted to ensure public trust in government institutions and processes, which in turn will improve public safety and will ensure consistency and parity at all levels of police governance for the province. The Director of Law Enforcement appointed by the province has provided clarity on what an enhanced security check consists of, which is a criminal records check, a law enforcement inquiry or record check, an open source inquiry, and in some circumstances, a security interview. The province will initially absorb the costs to perform these enhanced security checks for proposed appointments. Once initial appointments are finalized, municipalities will be required to cover costs associated with these enhanced security checks going forward. They do not yet have any firm cost estimates available. The Provincial Security Intelligence Office will send municipalities the necessary screening documents, which will then be provided to proposed applicants. The exact information required to be submitted is not yet known. However, the Provincial Director of Law Enforcement has advised that information regarding personal relationships, employment, and residential history for the previous 10-year period will be required. All the information will then be reviewed by the province prior to determining whether the applicant or appointee will be issued a certified security clearance and allowing them to be appointed to the municipal policing committee. The new enhanced security check process currently applies to new appointees. We are seeking clarification, but I don't think it applies to the current members of the Community Advisory Committee, as that committee has not been established by bylaw and is not in compliance with the legislation. Municipal policing committees are intended to enhance civilian governance of local policing by overseeing the administration of the Municipal Police Service Agreement, representing the interests and concerns of the public and of council to the officer in charge, developing a yearly plan of priorities and strategies for municipal policing in consultation with the officer in charge, developing a community safety plan in conjunction with the local RCMP and the mayor, including a plan for collaboration between the community and community agencies, and provide the community safety plan annually or on request to the minister, assist in the selection of the officer in charge, report annually or on request to the minister on the implementation of and updates to programs and services to achieve the priorities of the police service. Municipal policing committees are required to consider provincial policing priorities when setting local ones. A municipal policing committee is also required to designate a public complaint director who will receive complaints against police officers, act as a liaison between the policing committee, the officer in charge, and the complainant, perform duties assigned by the policing committee in regard to complaints, review the investigation conducted in respect of a complaint during the course of the investigation and at the conclusion of the investigation, offer alternative dispute resolution processes, and review the manner in which the alternative dispute resolution process is delivered, and provide reports to the policing committee as required by the policing committee. The public complaint director may be a member of the policing committee other than a member of council, an employee of the policing committee, an employee of the municipality, another person other than a council member who is qualified to serve in that capacity, a former police officer, as long as it is not for the same municipality where that police officer was employed, and shall not be a currently serving police officer. Recognizing that the report didn't give a whole lot of information, I hope that provided some clarity on the mandate and the composition of the committee and the purpose for it coming to committee of the whole. Some of the considerations, so the bylaw has been drafted, is in draft form. It will comply with the legislation, but there are some items for customization that the municipality can employ. For instance, the number of members to the municipal policing committee can be comprised of 3 to 7 members. We can appoint a certain number of members, so you can limit it to, say, 5 members, or you can have a range of 3 to 7. It's likely better to have a range so that there's a minimum of 3 and a maximum of 7, depending on the number of applicants you get. It will likely be a daunting task to some people when they learn what an enhanced security screening is, what's involved with that. The mandate of the MPC includes assisting in the selection of the officer in charge, as well as being privy to complaints against police officers. The current RCMP Community Advisory Committee includes space for a youth representative. One of the questions to consider is whether or not a youth representative should be retained on this committee. From administration's perspective, it's not recommended that a youth representative be included on this committee. While youth perspectives are valuable, participation in this particular committee may not be the most appropriate avenue for youth engagement. The MPC will have a significantly expanded role compared to the current RCMP Community Advisory Committee, including assisting in the selection of the officer in charge and being privy to complaints against police officers. These responsibilities involve sensitive and potentially confidential information that may not be appropriate for a youth representative. Given the serious nature of the topics discussed, including personnel matters and public safety concerns, committee members should have the maturity, experience, and decision-making capacity required to fulfill their role effectively. There are alternative ways to ensure youth perspectives are included, such as engagement through the youth center, town halls, etc. And best practices suggest that youth involvement is better suited to advisory bodies focused on community engagement rather than police oversight. Another consideration is the minimum number of meetings that the committee should have annually. Typically, that would be a minimum of at least 2 meetings per year, but that could be adjusted. And then council has the opportunity to provide remuneration to its committee members. Policy C23, Board and Council Committee Member Appreciation Policy, provides for a member honorarium of $30 per meeting in which the member is in attendance. It does not apply to councillors appointed as council representatives on the committee. So at the current rate, administration can likely absorb this into the operating budget. However, any significant increase in remuneration amount or the number of required meetings may have an impact on that budget. In addition to membership, council may wish to consider the cost to maintain the committee, which include but are not limited to the cost of the enhanced security check, which will need to be conducted every couple of years. And then finally, just clarity as to whether or not Councillor Natellenbos would wish to retain his appointment as primary representative on the committee, given that he will be subjected to an enhanced screening process and he will remain on the MPC until he ceases to be a member of council.
Perfect. Thank you for that presentation. Appreciate a lot of information there. And I'd imagine potentially administration may not even have all the answers yet to some of the questions that may be brought forward. But with that being said, we will go to questions. Councillor McCook.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the clarity on some of that. Do we have any clarity from the province on how this committee interacts with existing policing structures, so we're not at risk of operational overlap? So, for example, how does the public complaint officer differ from the Civilian Review and Complaints Commission for the RCMP, which is an independent agency that reviews complaints made by the public? Do you know that?
Through the chair to Councillor McCook, any complaints against the RCMP can go, they have the right to go to the CRCC to be complained about. If there's stuff that can be handled on a lower level, this is where this committee can kind of breach without going fully into the civilian review. Maybe something can be solved on a smaller level. But any civilian that has any complaint still has the option for the CRCC. If they're not happy with the decision from the MPC, there's nothing stated that they can't complain simultaneously to both agencies. But we're hoping that with this moving forward, it gives the public something very quick that they would get a response back as to hearing the details and being able to solve it through the NCOIC for the RCMP face to face and be able to resolve that issue sooner.
Okay, thank you. I recognize we don't have much of a choice in this, but some of it does feel like duplicative work. I guess, has the province provided any, so you talked about the funding support for the enhanced record checks. Do we have any other funding supports? Like what kind of administrative resources will be required, especially if there's any community engagement that is required? Do we know any of that yet?
Thank you for the question through the chair to Councillor McCook. I'll try to answer a couple of that, portion of that. I'm not sure I can answer the question fully. So there is, the minister did provide some information on, I think there was a police grant that we can access to help fund some of the costs associated with this. But I don't know if that's allocated to something else right now. From what I understand, it's current funding that we're receiving that we can put towards this, but I don't know how that current funding is being used. As for extra costs as administrative time, so we currently have the Community Advisory Committee, and there is administrative staff supporting that as far as I know. Director Melvin may be able to answer that better than I can.
2 seconds here, my apologies.
Through the chair to Councillor McCook, presently we would absorb that within our current budget. Once we fully determine, and most likely it'll take a budget cycle for us to fully determine what the actual cost will be. But the direction right now is that it'll be absorbed through the current approved budget for the policing.
Thank you. I hope that that's the case, and I hope that it's not something that costs a lot more and a lot more administrative time, because then it just feels like another thing that is kind of downloaded onto municipalities that we have to deal with. I guess lastly, what role will the committee play in influencing the RCMP's annual policing plan versus the committee's policing plan, and how do we avoid kind of potential friction and priority setting and whatnot?
Chief
Through the
Nolan.
chair to Councillor McCook. Presently, right now, myself and the NCOIC for the RCMP are talking regularly about the policing priorities. So we're well aware of K Division what their priorities will be, but it's up to the local RCMP detachment to communicate with administration and say, these are our priorities that what we want set for the city of Beaumont. So that will still continue to happen until there's some legislation that says otherwise. But those policing priorities are set locally with communication with administration, and then it'll be through this meeting, and then obviously reported back to council on committee minutes and going forward. So there won't be any change. We're not going to lose any ability to not set our own priorities unless there's something outstanding from the province that the geographical area needs to focus on. So,
Thank you. Appreciate that, and appreciate all the work. I know this, some of this was a little bit later than anticipated, but appreciate all the work on this. And I think, you know, having a good structure is always important. So hopefully this is positive for our community and their ability to kind of influence some decision making and say in regards to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, thank you. One of the questions I had brought in was just how we were going to determine the number of members at large, and I think I heard that range of 3 to 7 will be put in there to make it feel good and be safe, just as the number of members could go up and down. And I'm not sure if I missed it in the document review. Where do we talk about this advanced or enhanced screening process and that requirement? Like I heard you say it, but I've scanned back through the document and I'm not seeing where it says that's required. Or does that just not belong in a bylaw?
Thank you for the question through the chair to Councillor Van Newkirk. It doesn't necessarily need to be in the bylaw. And recognize, please, that this is a really rough draft that we brought forward to committee so that we could get something in front of you. Because it's in the legislation, it doesn't necessarily need to be in the bylaw. Okay. We will likely reference something in the bylaw just for transparency for committee members so that they're aware of that.
Yeah, so there will be some connection made to that in a further iteration.
Correct.
Yeah,
that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Penrod.
Thank you, Chair. 2 quick questions. I think the first one for either Chief Melvin or Ms. Dargy. Item 4.8 in the proposed bylaw, the term of any public member may be extended by a special resolution of council. Are you able to speak to the rationale for an item like that?
Thank you for the question through the chair to Councillor Penrod. We'll have to take another look at that. It was drafted in accordance with our current council committee's bylaw, but typically the council reserves the right to extend a member by resolution in the event that we advertise for members and we have limited response or no response and a current member wants to continue on the committee. Their term may be continued by that resolution of council.
And what's involved in a special resolution of council? Is there a higher threshold required?
That wording we'd have to just check that wording. There's nothing different between a special resolution and a resolution.
Sure, thank you. It just sounds, it reads like it's an override of the process. And under some circumstances, an override is helpful. Like you mentioned, if you don't want your committee to be hung because you can't recruit the people. And as you've mentioned, the bar for this committee, bar for entry is going to be significantly higher by the sounds of it than other advisory committees. So we'll appreciate more information on that question as it becomes available. Second question, do we anticipate currently that a person under the age of 18 years would be able to successfully complete an enhanced screening process review?
Thank you, Chair, through to Councillor Penrod. So again, the bylaw was drafted recognizing that we had a youth representative on the current CAC committee, and pending kind of some of the discussion here, likely we would not include a youth representative, and that would be one of the reasons as well, that they probably wouldn't be able to complete that enhanced security screening.
So that's the advice, is they likely would not be able to complete that?
We can confirm that. I don't know that for sure, but Chief Melvin may know.
Through the chair to Councillor Penrod, we've reached out to the RCMP at a local level to get some more information. They are asking similar questions that we are through their chain of command of how things are going to fold out and the increased screening, if anyone would be eligible for an increased screening below 18. We don't have that information presently as everybody's trying to get the information as quickly as possible. So as soon as we have that information, we'll be able to pass it on to council.
Appreciate it. In my opinion, I'd like to wait on that information before we make a final decision on whether to include or not. I hear the arguments made, and they seem reasonable to me as to why we might give special consideration for whether a youth on this committee would be the best fit or not. But I wouldn't want to preclude participation by a youth, especially in our community. Youth have opportunities in high school to take criminal justice courses. You might have somebody who's on track for a career in a policing profession that might have significant interest in an opportunity like this. Might be really great for them. I'd hate to see them just unable to apply. I wish being 18 would be a guarantee that someone would be mature and able to handle the rigors of a committee, but we haven't found a good way to guarantee that yet on any of our committees. So I want to push back, I guess, wherever I hear that as a simple age number, 18 being the bar a person has to get over. I'd farther rather receive the applications and judge them on their merits, regardless of age. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor. We had lost Councillor Barnhart for a little bit there, but I believe she's back. And before she had left, I did see a hand up. Councillor Barnhart, do you have anything
Thank you
to add?
very much. Sorry about that. I'll get my video going. All of a sudden, it just decided to close down. So, thank you. But I didn't notice a dispute resolution process anywhere in the proposed bylaw. Maybe you could speak to that. Because I do realize that this is not a council advisory committee. This is to oversee. So I'm just wondering how
I think I got the gist of.
don't want to be negative Nelly, but just want to go like, I'm sorry, did you hear that? Was that?
Yeah, I do believe we heard it. Ms. Darge, if you're able to answer that or try to.
Sure. Thank you. Councillor Barnhart, just so you know, you're cutting out, but I think I got I think I understand the nature of your question. So the committee will appoint a public complaint director who has the opportunity to offer an alternative dispute resolution process. So that comes straight from the legislation. There's nothing in the legislation that indicates what that alternative dispute resolution process is. It's up to the public complaint director to offer that alternative dispute resolution process, and then to ensure that that is to review the manner in which the alternative dispute resolution process is delivered. So there's some oversight by the public complaint director.
And Ms. Dargy, is that person, I believe I read that person gets selected by the committee?
That's correct.
Okay. So it won't be in place immediately. It's going to take a while for that person to be hired.
So it doesn't need to be an employee. They can be a member of the committee. They can be an employee of the municipality. They can be an employee of the committee. There's a number of opportunities for that, who that public complaint director can be. The intention is to have a fully drafted bylaw back before council for the February 25th council meeting. And then shortly after council provides third reading of that bylaw, we would begin the recruitment process for the committee. And then once that committee stands up, they would appoint their public complaint director.
Okay. And the last question I have at this point is just to clarify, the counselor who is appointed is there for the entire term of their office, which is different than how we look at our council appointees now. Is that the understanding I have?
That's correct, and that's in the legislation.
So it's for the entire term, not at council's pleasure, in other words?
That's correct.
Okay.
And to clarify, the wording is actually for the entire time that they are a council member. So it's not clear that it's just for their term. So if you are a continuing member, it seems to suggest that you will continue to be on the committee.
Not sure I understand the difference between being a councillor and being a continuing member of council.
Sure. So, for instance, if Councillor Natellenbos is the member on the committee and he runs for re-election and is re-elected, he would continue to be on the committee.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. Appreciate it.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor. I just have a couple of questions. First one, just being, I guess, some of the terminology used in what was presented, population over 15K, and that are policed by the RCMP. Is this solely for RCMP and not municipal police services?
Thank you for the question. So it is solely, this municipal policing committee is solely for municipalities that have contracts with the RCMP. I believe anyone that has a different type of policing service falls under the Police Advisory Board, Provincial Police Advisory Board.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then just next question, going into the roles here that we discussed, more so the public complaint director. Are we able to put in a requirement for some type of training or education as opposed to just a general individual who has no knowledge as to how some of these things should be addressed fulfilling that role, or what can be added to the policy to make sure that someone's the right fit versus not having a clear understanding of really the importance of that role?
So the legislation indicates who can be a member. We can consult with legal counsel to determine whether or not we can put further parameters around that, and then we can incorporate that into the bylaw if we're able to do that.
Perfect. Yeah, I don't know if I need to make a motion for that down the road here, but I do think it's critical for a role like this that you need to have a good understanding as to what you're dealing with and how to deal with complaints and yeah, potential conflict. But that being said, I do not see any further questions, so I appreciate the presentation, which will bring us to our next item. Assuming council is still good to go, let's push through. Yeah. 5.4, Economic Development 2024 Review. Ms. Niesink, mic number 6. You should be good to go.
Too short to reach it. Perfect. Thank you very much. This is really just something we're excited to bring to council. So we thought we'd bring a little bit of a recap of 24. It was a great year here in Beaumont, so we're going to highlight a few of those things that happened so we keep it all fresh in our minds, basically. Really, what we did in the first couple of years I was here is we talked about building up that foundation, understanding what we're selling for Beaumont, and then really chasing down the things that the Beaumontonians want. That really gained some traction. In 24, we started the year by bringing the gap analysis clicker, and I don't click it. What we talked about here was targeting the key retailers, the service providers, tailoring our commercial developments, and working on our occupancy rates. Enhancing the retail retention, the inflow, and then starting to provide that data-driven lens for the growth planning and what as we go forward. What was unique with this plan was that we did it with Beaumont-specific data. A lot of the work done before was done with Edmonton regional data, so it really paints a very different picture when you use Beaumont-specific data. From the gap analysis, the most useful tool we've had, the one that's gained the most I'd say excitement or attraction really is that target market. So we have that on the map here, and it talks about a potential trade area of 78,000 as it continues to grow, really starting to try to capture that traffic south of the Henday from Edmonton, which is attractive to retailers as you start to look at the traffic flow as we go forward. So it was a good way to start off the year. Through the year, we did see some good local business growth. About 618 local businesses. Looking at the graphs here, we have a couple shots of it, but your red is your home-based business and your gold is your commercial storefront. So we can see as I flip through these two, we have a lot of home-based businesses here in Beaumont. We have about 251 that are in commercial locations, 334 that are home-based, and 199 that are outside of the city. So those are your tradespeople who are working in Beaumont but not located here for the most part. We've had some really great market gap fills. So we've got dining and entertainment coming on with the Old Yale Brewery. We have a jewelry store coming in on 50th. There's a self-storage down on the south end on the 29th, 30th Avenue area. These are all things that were identified in the gap analysis, and we're seeing them come to the city, which we're very excited about. Another thing we had talked to council about is our commercial vacancy. So we had pretty high commercial vacancy. We really worked hard on addressing this as the year went forward. This was fantastically successful. In a large part, thank you to a co-working space on a second floor that brought a number of home-based businesses into commercial locations and reduced that vacancy. So overall, we saw a 27% improvement in the commercial vacancy, but a 50% reduction in the second floor vacancy. And that was huge for us because we had so much of it in Beaumont. And there's still talks about doing more co-working space and second floor space. So we're very excited to see that shift. There was a 56% increase in the permits year over year. So in 23, there was just over 263 million in commercial permits, and in 24, just shy of 322 million. You can see that driving into the city. There's new development popping up everywhere, which we're very excited about, until we looked at all the good work that Kendra's department is doing and realized it didn't help the tax split quite as much as we had hoped it would. Our housing development is also growing very quickly. So it's a great news story all the way around, but it's just a realization that as we keep building, so will the residential, and Beaumont is just growing so quickly, which is part of what makes us so attractive. We have started to really work on the advertising and the promotion of Beaumont. So our Director of Investment Attraction, Ms. Jones, was able to go to ICSC and start promoting the city. The Economic Developers Association of Canada was here in Edmonton, which gave us contacts with people from across the country. We have investment packages that are put together. We'll be bringing those to council in the next month or so. And we've also had our first big advertised promotional piece out, which was the Invest in Alberta magazine. Here's a clip of it from there. And what we're doing is we're really just trying to get Beaumont a name that developers are familiar with. We're not Beaumont, Texas, we're Beaumont, Alberta, we're growing, here's all the great opportunity. And the more we can get that out there, the more quickly recognizable we are, the easier it starts those conversations as we go out with the cold calling and as we go out promoting the community. So as we look forward, there's a few things we'll be doing a little bit differently. One is that increased advertising and marketing presence. So we'll have more of those announcements coming through the year of places we've found to strategically promote Beaumont and attract the right things in. We're going to have a digital enhancement, so we're improving the website, making it developer friendly, and bringing the information that the developers are looking for to their fingertips. We're also going to be doing quarterly business analysis. So the business analysis have been very useful in dealing with potential new business and developers as we go forward, tracking things like our vacancy rates. So we'd been doing them annually as we built out the systems, and we believe we now have the ability to keep those up quarterly, which is very useful to us. And we're also going to be looking for opportunities for our local businesses to network. We have fantastic businesses here in Beaumont. We work with the Chamber on some of this, some are with the Leduc Chamber, but we want an opportunity where all businesses in Beaumont have that opportunity to get together, to do learning, to share different things. So those are things that we're really pushing for in 25. And beyond that, I'm open to any questions.
Perfect. Thank you for the presentation. So just wondering if you have any questions?
Thank you, Chair Natellenboss. Probably have one question that I just wanted to, maybe more of a comment in terms of well, first of all, let me say, like, fantastic. We are definitely moving in the right direction, and yeah, we are a great place to be, which is why residents keep getting built, as well as businesses coming in, and home-based businesses has always been our strong economic engine in our community. So I am excited about some of the things that are happening, for sure. I keep hearing from home-based businesses as well as storefronts that they're struggling around some of the things that will keep them here and help them to be successful, one of them being signage. And this is age-old. We seem to always have concerns and challenges around that. I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit in terms of anything that might be happening there to make that better.
Ms. Raymond.
Thank you through the chair to Councillor Barnhart. That is something that we're going to be looking at through the what's working, what's not working review of the land use bylaw. We know that signage is an issue for businesses within the municipality. So that is work that will probably take place here going out probably in the fall. We're going to be looking at more opportunities too around other home-based businesses, more comprehensive regulation looks. So that'll be part of it.
Thank you for that, and keep up the great work.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McCook.
Thank you, Chair. I echo Councillor Barnhart. I just want to applaud your team on the work conducted. I know it was a big undertaking and a lot of heavy lifting to go through everything to where we see ourselves today. And a record 22.3% year-over-year increase is not something to shy away from. While impressive, our residential side did kind of overtake that, but I think it's still also something that we should celebrate and acknowledge. Just a couple quick questions. As Beaumont continues to grow its commercial landscape, a lot of that, I guess, how do we ensure that the growth aligns with maintaining the city's unique character and community appeal? In addition to that, I guess, a variety of businesses. So I understand the free market and who wants to come can come. However, we do get a lot of complaints that we have too much of certain businesses. So how are we looking to kind of expand on that?
Through the chair to Councillor McCook, it's a very good question, and it's one that all ACTF people struggle with. When new developments come online, we do our very best to get involved as soon as possible. The sooner we're involved, the more opportunity we have to bring unique and different items. At the end of the day, you're right, it is a free market, and the developers will tend to take whoever will lease immediately, as I would if I was developing. I understand that, but we do our best just to promote those things. The gap analysis is a useful tool to say, look, here's all the things your residents would like to see. As for the unique character, our planning team does a great job of working with people to keep in the guidelines. We do a little bit of massaging of here's why it's important, but really our planning team keeps that in check for us.
Perfect. Thank you for that. I think highlighting the gap analysis is good as well. And it's just good to know that you know, there is the free market, but we are trying to do our best to maintain what we can within that. My second question, so despite the positive shift from non-residential and residential growth continues to outpace our non-residential, what kind of different approaches can we or have we explored to kind of either accelerate the non-residential or kind of continue to try to balance it out in some way, shape, or form?
I think promoting the specific Beaumont data was the first one. Beyond that, the promotional work you'll see in 2025 is where we're really trying to attract the people who haven't thought of Beaumont before. So we've worked with a lot of the people who have developed here. This will hopefully extend our reach. We want to see people who haven't been here coming here. We want to keep responding to things of people and get them to the community. We have a fantastic community here, and it's very easy to fall in love with. Our job is to get them here, get them in love with it, and then get them developing. We also are working with private landowners as much as possible to put them with the developers. Not all lands are commercially listed, but we have team members who have great relationships with these people, and we do what we can to bring everyone to the table. So we're just trying to go every way we can to bring these different people in.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. And I think, as you said, promoting specific Beaumont data and getting people to know and understand our community will be important, and that will probably help diversify our business base. But appreciate all the work that's being done. This isn't work that happens overnight either. It happens over a period of time, and it's always ongoing. So appreciate it and look forward to the continued updates.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, thank you. Great update. And as of late, I've been attending some more events centered around the Beaumont Chamber of Commerce. And one of the important things that I hear in those rooms is the desire and willingness to, put Beaumont on a pedestal and show that Beaumont is the place to be for business. So I do hear that loud and clear in those rooms. And I just want to highlight the continual opportunity for these types of updates within the community as well. All the data that's in here is annualized data, but I think there's an opportunity to share some wins or something along the way. I just don't know how you do that. So it's hard to say what would trigger that, or if quarterly updates is too soon, or a biannual update or whatever, just to hear more from the economic development team, because there's lots to say. So and I think it's all positive. I was in a business this past weekend, or this past week, I guess. They've been in the community for 3 to 4 years, and they're still hearing, I didn't know you were here, right? So that's despite the efforts of signage and marketing and people moving about in the community and such, right? Like it just really shows the slog that it can be as a small business owner. So one of the important pieces of data that you highlighted on was that whole commercial vacancy piece, because we did have quite a conversation around that, and and we've seen a pretty good shift in that, right? Like, was 21.3, now 15.4. Do we have, or do you know, is there any regional vacancy data on the commercial side that is readily available at all? Or, if we don't have that, I would be curious to see where that 15.4% lands relative to region. So, that's quite a specific question. So if you don't know now, that's completely fine.
Got it.
If you don't mind, I'll just have you step up.
Just lean real far back.
There it goes. Yeah, you're good now. It's red.
Thank you. NAI Commercial provides quarterly updates for the 4 quadrants in the Edmonton region, as well as Leduc and Nisku data. From the last update that I have seen, which was Q3 2024, we are still lagging fairly significantly behind. But when we are able to provide an additional update, we should hopefully see a continued improvement. From the last numbers that I recall, the Edmonton South was about 7.4%, and Leduc at about 5.6%.
Yeah, and like you say, I think as that, I would imagine as the South Complex comes to life in that co-op area, that'll be a market shift just right there in that vacancy rate going down. So I think maybe that's what you're alluding to as well. So yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, and there was, I hear less of it now, the concern about vacancy. Folks still point it out, but it's not near the community conversation that it used to be. So what I would say is that, the efforts that are being put forward by the economic development team are working and should be commended, right? Like, if the community has lost a talking point, that means we're making some traction. So I think that's pretty great. The last piece for me is around the advertisement and promotion of Beaumont. So first of all, I appreciate it. I think for quite a long time, so many people were coming to Beaumont so fast, it's hard to know what to say or what to do. Are we promoting residential? Are we promoting residential? Do we want people to hold off for a bit while we catch up? Like, what was the right message, right? But here we've hit a major publication, and we're telling our story, where we're located, what our projections are going to be. There's as we heard tonight, there's a story to be told on the medical side as we pour some efforts into that. There's a story to be told on vacancy rates decreasing. There's a story to be told on a flood of folks still choosing Beaumont, which is great. And I'm very happy to see the advertising and promotion piece come to life. So so kudos for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Penrod.
Thank you, Chair. Really appreciate the report. And when I think about and characterize the work of our Economic Development Department, the word methodical comes to mind. So at times, your work hasn't been as fast as we would like to see, or as the broader community would like to see. But I have the sense from your report and from our conversations and from seeing you out at some of these economic development opportunities and chamber gatherings that we're just on the threshold of a real breakthrough here. So thank you for your dedicated work to build that foundation that you talked about that is data-based, and now look forward to some of the fruit coming to bear from your years of hard work. So I think 2024 was a historic year, and 2025 looks to be even better. So congratulations on that work. Can you give us a little bit more detail on the role the shared space, I think you talked about in Centerville, has had in filling vacant commercial space and helping home-based businesses to transition to commercial space? And what role has the city's business incubator program had in this success?
Through the chair to Councillor Penrod, what we saw was the development of an additional co-working space. So at one time, the city ran a co-working space. We decided that the private market had room for that. We shut that down. When that happened, we immediately saw the co-working space to the south end of the city fill. There was still a need. When there's a need, the public will come and address the need. And what we saw was the co-working space on that second floor come together and fill very quickly. It's had a huge role in the vacancy, and that the second floor commercial was a target for us. I think it will continue to have a role in the vacancy as the demand continues to grow. That large number of home-based businesses will continue to grow, and as they grow, something like a co-working space is a great transitional piece for that in-between step until they're ready for full commercial. So I think what we'll see is that becoming a continually important piece for Beaumont as these businesses continue to grow, and we'll continue to work with them to promote.
Perfect. So it sounds like there's still additional, market share might not be the right word, but additional opportunities and need in the community for additional spaces like that. I just wonder, on top of that, what additional opportunities your department sees to work with successful home-based businesses to make that next step. What we hear sometimes is that it's a big step from home to traditional storefront. So what other ideas, or, as Beaumont, we're continuing to market and brand ourselves as this place of innovation. What other best practices or innovative pieces are you seeing in other communities, or do you expect could work here to address that?
Through the chair to Councillor Penrod. In other communities, we don't see quite the push that we would need to have here. Beaumont is very accepting of home-based businesses, and through that, we've attracted quite a few. I think the transition to a commercial space is a big leap. It's larger for some type businesses than others. So we have ideas around what other types of spaces could be put as transitionary. We're also working to find information to send the businesses. Sometimes there's financial seminars, sometimes there's grants. Anything we can find along those lines that help them toward that next step, we send out to them, but we're always cognizant that we are the municipality and not a business advisor. So we're careful to send out things that are of good opportunity, things that could be useful, but not to tell people how to run their business, if that's making sense. So what we really want to do is give people the opportunity to grow, give them the place to grow, work with people who want to build those places for them to grow, and then just make sure they know about it.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor. I just have two quick questions. I'll try and combine them here. Appreciate Councillor Van Newkirk's question in regards to some of the regional data, because that was going to be my next question. In terms of, I guess, what's a healthy number for vacancy, or more so, what's our target that we're trying to hit? I'll be optimistic here and say by the end of 2025. Like, what is our ultimate goal in terms of vacancy, aside from 0, which is ultimately where we want to be, but realistic goal?
Thank you very much. Realistically, what we'd like to see is more in line with the region. Given the amount of supply we have and the amount of our vacancy, which is undeveloped second floor, I think that if we could get down a few more % through the year, it's a benefit. Our initial target was just to deal with the vast difference it was. The efforts have brought that forward. I think what we do is we keep pushing towards that second floor. The development coming up, we have a lot of businesses already secured for those. That's fantastic. Well, we don't, they do. And that's fantastic. But I think the closer we can come in line to the regional target, the more attractive we are for people creating new developments. If I'm building a strip mall, I'm going to look at the community with 7%, the community with 5%, and when another community has 20 or 30%, I have questions. So what we want to do is, much like with the public things, just remove that topic point. So the lower we can get it, the better, but we don't have a specific number we're aiming for.
Perfect, thank you. Very similar question, but more so based on the tax base and ratio from commercial versus residential. What's our ultimate goal there? If we're around that 95.5-ish, let's say, roughly, where do we want to be 5 years down the road? Like, what are we striving for?
Thank you for the question. They always say the perfect community is an 80-20. That's not realistic for a community like Beaumont. The rate we're growing residentially, what I would like to do is keep up. I would like to see enough commercial investment that we're keeping up with the residential. An improvement would be fantastic, but we just have to understand if we're ready for that at this time. So we're going to keep pushing as hard as we can for it. But again, we haven't set a specific number that we want it to be, because it's hard to understand how much residential is going to come in, how much commercial land is available, and how quickly we can get that together. So the more we can bring in, the better. If we ever change that number significantly, that'll be great. And we'll just keep working towards that.
Perfect. Thank you. I see Mayor Daniluk has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Comment, actually, echoing my previous councilor's comments. Oh, thank you. Just a comment, actually. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just echoing my previous colleagues' comments. The increase in the commercial vacancy rate is absolutely huge. It's a huge undertaking to move that needle, and moving it 27% in less than a year is an absolutely monumental achievement. Any active community development officer anywhere in Alberta would be very happy with that increase in vacancy. And we're very, very happy. As Steve mentioned, it's taken me a talking point for some people in the community, because we can see the development happening in our area. So we can take some credit, Economic Development Department and Jennifer and your leadership can take some credit for this, and I'm happy to provide that to you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mayor. With that being said, we'll move on to our next item. Again, we thank you for that presentation and the detail that you had provided. Next item on the agenda is item number 6, which is councillor inquiries. Madam Clerk, are there any new councillor inquiries? Okay, perfect. It appears there are, so we will wait for those to come up on the screen. All right, it appears there's a councillor inquiry from Councillor Penrod. Go ahead, Councillor Penrod.
Thanks, Chair. Please provide any information on any plans to conduct a snow and ice control service level review, and if so, please include details on what the review would entail and potential timelines. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor. If you have a comment, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let you on your term as Deputy Mayor. Big responsibility Deputy Mayor has is to run committee of the whole meetings, and Nathan has done a very good job in your term as Deputy Mayor. Coming up will be Councillor Penrod to finish off our year from March to the end of our term. As Deputy Mayor, part of his responsibility as well is to, when I can't make a meeting or a community event, regarding speaking. The deputy mayor is the first call to fill in for me, and every councillor up until this point has done a very good job of doing that. As Councillor Telebas has, I'm looking forward to Councillor Penra to fill those same shoes in the next number of months. So thank you, Nathan, for your term as deputy mayor before we close our open session. Thank you very much for your work.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. Wanting to take a quick 5-minute recess, just some advice from you, Ms. Winter. Do we want to enter closed session or just wait, have that 5-minute recess, then enter closed session?
Thank you, Chair. If we just want to do the motion to enter into closed session and then we can take the break.
Perfect. Thank you. With that being said, do I have a member of council willing to make the motion to enter into closed session pursuant to the Freedom of Information and Privacy Act, Section 24? Mayor Daniluk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that council move into closed session at 7:05 p.m. pursuant to the Freedom of Information Protection of Privacy Act, Section 21 and 25. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor. Are we able to put that to a vote, please? Councillor Barnhart, how do you vote?
In favor?
Perfect. Thank you. That carries unanimously.